Paranormal King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com.
Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of August 30th, 2022, and officially episode number 526. And this is your host, as always, Dr. Brian D. Parsons, and we are live on the Paranormal King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com. And I'm back from a 2-week hiatus. Not my choice. It was work-related, working me to pretty much to death here, 6 days a week, 12, 15-hour days. So, yeah, I'm on vacation this week. Wanted to drive down to Florida to watch that launch. Good thing I didn't. I had a feeling that what happened on Monday was going to happen anyway, so I saved my ticket. I've got a ticket to ride on that thing, but I don't think they're going to honor it. I don't think they're going to let me ride on that. I offered. Said, hey, you could leave one of those dummies on the launch pad and put me in there in its place. I mean, I could fit in as a dummy. No problem. I'd love to fly around the moon. That'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, they need to iron out what's going on with that Engine 3 thing. It's making me a little nervous, but at least I didn't blow it up on the launch pad. And we'll talk about that a little later. We got a little bit of news to catch up on from the last 3 weeks. Yes, it took 2 weeks off, but that gives you a whole another week. It's technically 3 weeks, and you'd think that it would make it easier to put together a show, but it actually kind of makes it harder because then you're looking at a lot of stories, you're wondering how they're going to develop, and sometimes they just end up on the cutting room floor. So you only have an hour. I don't want to do just snippets, talk about one thing for 20 seconds, move on to the next story. So a lot of stuff kind of fell to the wayside. A lot of stuff I thought was going to be really interesting. So far, it's turned out not to be. And really kind of a letdown, which I guess you'll have that anyway with the paranormal. But we've got a lot of cryptid news. It seems like this is the year of the cryptid, even though I guess UFOs are pretty big. But like a lot of cryptid news this year. And of course, it's almost September to be September in just a couple of days, which is kind of crazy. It just seems like this year's just gone flying by. Probably making up for 2020. But yeah, September. Then, of course, right around the corner is October. The silly season is pretty much upon us here for the paranormal, and we'll all be in demand. This is when anyone involved in the paranormal is either asked to speak at a library or to do interviews or whatever. Of course, you got to be relevant, and I haven't published a book in 5 years, so I'm not relevant anymore. But I do have, so far one. I haven't gone out of my way this year to try to get anything anyway, but I was invited to a library down in Westerville, Ohio. Granted, it's kind of a weird topic. I usually let them choose whatever they want because it doesn't bother me. I like to change subjects. I don't like to talk about the same thing every year. But they have a theme this year. They did it last year. It's about wizards and wands. So I have to tie in wizards and ghosts, which is going to be tough, but I think I've got a way to do it, and it's going to be interesting. I'm excited for it, to get some hopefully younger people interested in the ghost field and get them interested in the paranormal beyond what they see on TV. So we'll see how that works out. Question in chat, did you do UFOs yet? Writing a book? Yeah, I wrote my second to last book. That was 2015? Handbook for the Amateur UFO Investigator. Pretty good book, I think. Talk about UFOs. On the odd occasion, I was the keynote speaker at the Kecksville UFO Festival a few years back. Love talking about UFOs. People get really, really into it. the audience. You got to be careful what you say because you get to see them get all upset if you say anything negative, or especially Roswell. I don't talk about Roswell anymore because, man, people are so opinionated about it. Even though there's a lot of information that goes against it, people they get very, very upset about it. But I enjoy talking about any paranormal topic, especially UFOs, because it deals with space, deals with a lot of technology. And believe it or not, if you had to ask which one of the three paranormal topics, ghosts, cryptozoology, or UFO research, do we have an advantage of technology in? Honestly, I would say UFOs. We have an abundance of technology, from weather to radar to satellite tracking and all sorts of things that we're always watching our atmosphere. We have flight track information. We know pretty much anything and everything that's flying around up there, and we're constantly watching it. So you don't get that with ghosts. You don't get that in the woods with cryptids. So I think there's a major advantage to that. Granted, we've heard a lot of these experts talking about creating specific technology to aim toward the skies to try to find UFOs flying around. But we shall see. And speaking of cryptids, we shall now dive into cryptid news for the week. And we're going to go to Australia. So pack your bags. Make sure you got your passport. We're going to head to Australia, which you probably know where I'm going with that. It's been in the news for weeks. We've talked about it, I don't know how many times over the course of the last year and a half. It was a big story back in March of this year, as well as in September of 2021. And unfortunately, September 2021 was the sad 85th anniversary of the last known living thylacine that died at the Hobart Zoo in Tasmania. So, of course, we're talking about the thylacine, not the yowie, thylacine. There is yowie news out there. Supposedly some guy saw a 12-foot yowie, but it's got nothing to back it up except for a photograph that looks, it's just trees. It's just trees. I get let down every time I see somebody has evidence of a Bigfoot or a yowie or Yaren or whatever, wherever they're at, and it's just light and shadow. It's pareidolia. It's light and shadow. They never see it when they take the picture. They always see it when they're, looking at the pictures days later or hours later, away from the area. And if they were to go back, same time of day, and take the same picture in the same location, they'd probably see the same shadow. But they're not going to do that because then that would negate their story. Anyway, back to the thylacine. Caused some international attention a few weeks ago. Kind of just happened right after my last show. And I kind of sidestepped it because we've already talked about it. This isn't new news. It seems like we talk about it every few months. It hits the news cycle about bringing the Tasmanian tiger back from extinction. I couldn't tell you. We've probably talked about it on this show maybe 10 times the last 5-6 years. And every time they talk about it, they always say it's going to be 10 years. So it's been 10 years, like 5 years ago. So we should only be at 5 years at this point. But they're making some really good strides toward bringing back the Tasmanian tiger, as well as some other creatures. The Dallas-based Colossal Biosciences is kind of leading the way. They're pledging to bring back the Tasmanian tiger. They state they have 50 scientists and about $15 million devoted to the project, and project to have the marsupials running around within the next 10 years. But again, we've heard that same thing probably for almost 10 years at this point. But and the last time we talked about this back in March, they do have sequenced the DNA for this, so it's not like it's Jurassic Park or Jurassic World where you're going to have to patchwork DNA, which doesn't work, by the way. It's not how science works. You can't just insert frog DNA and just hope everything turns out okay. It's not how it works, but makes for a good movie. But in reality, that wouldn't work. But one of the latest things that's causing a little controversy, other than the fact that maybe they should concentrate on preservation instead of bringing back extinct animals that we've already killed off for different reasons, is the fact that they're using campaigns with what they're calling scientific influencers who are approached to get paid to endorse the project. Granted, they have to sign non-disclosure agreements first, and not everybody thinks this is a good idea, nor is it thought to be a good idea by many. Obviously, influencers influence. They make people believe what they believe. So you get, obviously these stars, these basketball players that are telling us who to vote for and what's right and wrong in our society. These people that are making $30-40 million a year living in their mansion that they're disconnected so far from reality. I don't know why we listen to these people. But there's a few famous people, some people that are not really scientists. They're more or less movie stars or actors, or there's a few scientists that are involved in this project. But to me, it's kind of shady. You're just trying to convince people to donate money to a project that I don't really see. I'm excited. I'd love to see thylacines running around. I'd like to see them at a zoo. I think that would be exciting. But, again, at what cost? Is that really the right thing to do? Does that make up for what we've done? Killing these things off because we felt threatened by them, thinking that they're killing livestock when they really weren't. Took away other land and just killed these animals off for sport. You can't make up for that. And they had their time. Things have moved on. Is bringing them back going to reestablish Tasmanian, the ecosystem? It's not really that upside down. But yeah, spending this money and effort on a de-extinction program, is that really a good idea? Or should we be trying to save the existing creatures that are on the brink of extinction instead? I think that's the smarter thing. If we could spend $15 million on the on Tasmania, maybe removing some of the species of animals that are running around that are causing damage that shouldn't be there, or to nurture those that are there that are impacted by human behavior. So I don't know. We'll see. Again, it would be cool to see them, but again, at what cost for science? I'm not sure. But either way, while some people think that the Tasmanian tiger can only be brought back by science, a lot of people still think the thylacine is alive and well, running around, even on the mainland of Australia, which every time I read the story, I just kind of beat my head on the desk. I don't. So Australia has been devoid of the thylacine or the Tasmanian tiger for thousands of years. Not decades, not 100 years, 200, thousands. The chance of them finding a thylacine on the mainland of Australia is pretty much impossible. But yet we still get these stories. And earlier this month, footage was taken of a strange-looking creature while a family was walking in the Belair National Park in South Australia, which is okay. That's still in the direction of Tasmania. But Tasmanian tiger, hence Tasmania, were mainly found in Tasmania. Now, historically, yes, they were found on the mainland of Australia, but they've been basically extirpated. So they've been locally extinct on Australia for thousands of years. So probably not going to find one running around. Jessie Mildry was walking in the park with her son and her sister when the trio saw a strange creature. And Jessie said of the encounter, quote, "We saw this thing starting to move across the road. And to start with, it's a bit strange. You sort of go through a bit of thought process in your head. And it's like, oh, that's a bit of a weird looking kangaroo. Then they thought it's a really scraggly looking dog. But then it got a little closer to us, and I thought, no, that's not a dog either. It had a really weird gait to it, sort of lolloping almost movement, unquote. So strange movement, behavior, which, if you've seen the video of the Thylacine, Tasmanian tiger, the old school black and white stuff, they do have a weird way that they kind of move around, but it doesn't sound like that's what they're describing in this. And when they described it, and I looked at the picture of this creature, which I've put in the chat room. So if you're listening live, I appreciate that. I love live listeners. Love doing the show live. Used to record the show for years, but live radio is far better, I think. Far, far better. But if you tune into the chat room, you get this extra dimension of actual pictures that I'm talking about. Granted, you could always Google this stuff. When I'm talking about the Belair creature. So this creature looks a little weird. Doesn't seem to have a whole lot of fur on it. Looks maybe like an anteater with the head. Looks a little strange. So I can see why somebody would not initially understand what they're looking at. Jessie also stated that her sister felt it was a Tasmanian tiger or thylacine, and that others on a Facebook community page, of course, that's where you should always get your, your scientific, influence and information from, because Facebook is just full of scientists, people who can disseminate photographs with very, very high accuracy, and of course, objective, not subjective, not just knee-jerk reactions at all. So Facebook community page, greatest place you can go. And of course, I don't really feel that way, just trying to be funny, but they had seen, people had said they'd seen strange things at the park as well. Tasmanian wildlife biologist and honorary curator of vertebrate zoology at the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery, Nick Mooney, stated that after viewing the footage, he states it depicts nothing more than a fox with severe mange. Now, that's unfortunate. A lot of people think that Nick Mooney is like the absolute biggest skeptic towards the thylacine, but he is, he's open-minded. He wants to believe that these things are out here, but all these videos and photographs and things that constantly pop up where people just automatically jump to that conclusion, it's really annoying. And while he wants this to actually occur, he's not just going to sit back and let people make this claim when there's obviously more to it than that. And looking at the picture, I would have to agree that obviously whatever creature this really truly is suffering from mange. And most people in this part of the country, if they're not used to being not in this park a lot, probably have not even seen a regular fox that much, let alone a fox with mange. I've seen some fox with even partial mange, and at first they're kind of hard to really figure out what you're looking at. So I can't imagine seeing a fox with complete mange like that, severe mange. This poor animal is probably no longer with us at this point, but kind of fool you, kind of fool the senses when you're looking at something with no hair, something that you're used to seeing. And again, fox aren't that prevalent in different parts of Australia. They were an animal that, it seems like it's the theme of the show when I'm going through the stories in my mind here, that introduced animals. So Australia is like really bad with that. A lot of animals were introduced, caused the downfall of the thylacine with other animals that were introduced. But yeah, I would agree. This is a fox with mange, not Tasmanian tiger. Doesn't even have hardly any of the hallmarks of a Tasmanian tiger at all. But of course, a lot of people would say no. that they've seen strange things. Mooney added, he does say that it, quote, it's got all the hallmarks of a fox with mange. It's lost a lot of hair off its tail, and it's got very large ears like a fox. The movement when scooting off to the left is a quick walking, breaking immediately into a trot, exactly like small canids and cats do. It's very unlike any marsupial I know, including the walking Thylacine in the old movie. I've seen a number of these sorts of videos, and they're usually filmed with a phone, so they're not the definition, not excellent, unquote. So, yes, while we all have technology in our pockets to film things, it's usually not the best. Your camera phones are meant for selfies and close photographs of people in different lighting conditions, not for animals out in a field. And this actually is from a video, I believe. So the video was filmed and turned in. So certainly there's EXIF data attached to the video, probably taken from an iPhone. So I'm certain that, I mean, you're not going to get that from a news story. You're not going to be able to extract EXIF data. I would have to have the original, but I'm sure that I would hope that anybody that would post this story would have looked at that information. Yes, and like I said, despite being a skeptic toward the discovery of the thylacine in the wild, Mooney is backed up with science. It's documented that the carnivorous marsupial went extinct on the mainland anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 years ago. And the last living ones were hunted into extinction, of course, along with habitat loss, the introduction of disease, and competing animals in Tasmania, and it disappeared in the 1930s, pretty much at the same time that they realized that these animals were worth saving, but too little, too late. Once these animals are teetering on extinction, there's really not a whole lot you can do, and that's pretty much where they're at. If there's anything left, they're probably gone by now. So a lot of hopeful thinking, a lot of wishful thinking, a lot of videos and photograph and trail cameras, but nothing conclusive. So I think our best bet at this point is to wait another 9 or 10 years to see if science can bring these guys back. But of course, they're going to be trapped in zoos. They're not going to let these things loose in the wild. I don't know how you would do that anyway. So yeah, it's just all a ploy. It's just all a money grab for these people to talk about bringing back the thylacine. But as skeptical as Mooney sounds, he doesn't want people to stop looking for the thylacine. He states, quote, just because I have an opinion that it's not a thylacine, I would tell people don't let that hold you back. Go and try and get some better pictures, unquote. Use something other than an iPhone. He also feels that despite the massive effort to bring back the thylacine from extinction, the, quote, talent and intellect and money will be much better off spent conserving species that look like they're going to go extinct, unquote. So, he pretty much echoes what a lot of other people have said. And there's a lot of animals that we have really caused a lot of issues for. I see in the chat room the tiger closing in on extinction, of course. And one of the reasons for that is because we have separated these animals from other breeding groups. And when you do that, you can look at here in the United States, we've got the Florida panther. There's so few of them that they're inbreeding, which is causing disease. It's causing, these creatures to just not be able to live because of the inbreeding. They've tried to introduce mountain lion DNA from out west to try to save them. But even when they do that, these animals are being hit by cars. Same thing with tigers. Tigers are running out of real estate. These animals need a lot of room to roam, and they end up entering into residential areas in India and Africa where, they're readily hunted because we can't have them in our neighborhood. We love them, but not in my neighborhood. So they're being hunted off because of the expansion. And it's sad to know that there are more tigers living in the United States in captivity than there are in the wild. That's true, and that's very sad. But we got to do what we got to do. We have to figure out how we can coexist with these animals and allow them to have their breeding areas and to fully function. Like I said, we have the Florida panther, and people are panicking about the regular mountain lions all the time. They will not let them reestablish themselves here in the eastern United States. They want to get rid of them out west at the same time instead of just allowing them to flourish. And if you let them flourish, they'll hit their own boundaries. They'll hit a point where, okay, enough mountain lions. There's enough in these areas. They're animals. Nature has a way of taking care of these things, but we think that we're smarter than nature. And so we've caused a lot of problems when we try to overthrow nature. I just feel like I'm complaining about everything, but it's true. It's true. And let's see, what else we got? We got the Loch Ness Monster. Believe it or not, yes, the Loch Ness Monster. We'll go back to, we'll talk more about animals. Should have kept going with that, but yeah, we'll talk more about animals being in the wrong spots here in a second. But I do have a Loch Ness Monster story I want to talk about real quick. It's been a really quiet year, and I know a lot of people don't like the Loch Ness Monster. I think it's funny because science is pretty much, you talk about any animal, any cryptid in existence, and the Loch Ness Monster has been pretty much torn apart by science. They did, Neil Gemmell did the, from Otago University. Speaking of Tasmania, I'm sorry, no, he's New Zealand, Otago University. They took water samples from throughout Loch Ness at varying depths, all up and down, and they found no DNA. So they took eDNA from the water samples, found no large creatures that could explain the Loch Ness Monster. And of course, the headlines were about giant eels, which really made no sense at all. It's not a giant eel. But despite all these things with science saying, no, there's no creature, no one spotted anything, and the fact that there's legitimately documents that prove that in the 1930s, hotel owners pushed this story of the Loch Ness Monster in order to bring more people out. So the story is just garbage. It's been noted. But people still want to believe. And as long as people still believe in this creature, you could drain Loch Ness and let it be empty for decades and fill it back up and people will still see it. They'll still swear it's still around. But it's been a pretty quiet year this year for the Loch Ness Monster. So far for 2022, only 4 official sightings and no webcam sightings, according to the official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register operated by Gary Campbell. So in 2021, Gary separated the webcam sightings from the physically present sightings since a lot of people were observing from home. Obviously, this was around COVID 2020. There were still travel restrictions in place the following year. So he made a smart decision to separate the webcam sightings from the in-person sightings. So in 2021, there were 6 official sightings, along with 10 webcam sightings. The biggest issue that everyone's always had with these webcam sightings is the webcam sits on a hill about a half mile from the loch. It's on a hill, a few hundred feet above, so technically from the water's edge, it's probably more than a half mile. You just can't see anything. There's no detail. You just see waves. You don't know what's causing it. Anything that's in the water, you can't really make out any detail. And maybe that's by design. Maybe that's what they want. They want as much ambiguity as possible. And the camera itself, you see people talk about potato cameras. Oh, this is like a carrot. It's not even a potato. A horrible camera. Um, yeah, it's just blurry. It's distant. It's like on the moon, looking at the countryside there in Scotland. So many of the sightings are just interpretations, basically, of pixels. What was it? Last year we had the stand-up paddleboarders that were seen, and the forget who, probably Ian O'Fadigan said that they were. It was definitely a Loch Ness monster. It was not paddleboarders, but these paddleboarders had photographs taken with waterproof cameras that were far better than that webcam sitting up on the hill, proving that they were actually there. So now we have a solution for all this. Kind of excited, kind of not excited, because now we're going to have even more webcam sightings. But maybe we'll start to see maybe some more logical explanations for these things. Visit Inverness Loch Ness has now added 5 new cameras covering various parts of Loch Ness to help aid in potentially finding the elusive creature. I don't think it's going to help, but we'll see some ducks. Might see some deer swimming across the loch. We're going to see definitely some wind creating some weird waves that people will definitely claim is the Loch Ness Monster. The cameras are, interestingly, they're located at hotels and lodges. So there's some good advertising. So there's advertising and you get to see the views. Part of me thinks that if you're showing the view, do I really need to go there? Because I can just sit at home and watch on the camera, save a lot of money of travel. But they're hoping that this is going to bring more people out to travel. And of course, we always mention every time about how much the Loch Ness Monster brings in millions of dollars in local economy. So whether it's real or not, it doesn't matter. It's the belief in the Loch Ness Monster that brings people out, and they stay for the beautiful views and the lovely weather. Not really. It's like going to London. It's always raining. The cameras, again, hotels and lodges surrounding the loch, they seem to be pretty decent. I've actually not seen them during the day, but they have, you can see like a screen cap of them. The views are pretty good on a couple of them. A couple others are, again, very far from the water because of where the lodges or hotels are located. There's another camera. So they actually added 6. So the news stories only talk about 5 because 5 are covering water. There is one showing landscape and sky, which is I'm kind of excited about that one because it might enable the viewer to see red deer or possibly the northern lights in the fall and winter. So you can check out the website, visit InvernessLochNess.com, one word, and click on the Things to Do tab at the top. And then you can go down to live cameras. It's like there's only 2 options. Go to live cameras, and you'll see all the cameras. So it's 8:30 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be dark. It'll be dark time out there, so you probably have to wait. What about 1, 2 in the morning? Probably starts sunrise out there, so you can start watching tomorrow morning if you got the time. But yeah, people believe all sorts of weird stuff about the depth of Loch Ness. There is rumors of cave systems, but it's really caves is that's kind of false description. It's more or less just holes, not really caves, because caves would indicate that you could travel and hide, like a dragon would hide in a cave. But it's just holes underneath. But yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot of oxygen down there because of the way that water, full of peat. Most fish have a hard enough time breathing in that water anyway. But that's why there's very few diverse types of fish that are in the loch. And very highly doubtful that there's any large creature swimming around. Again, we have the environmental DNA to study to prove it. But the jury's out. Everyone believes, as long as people believe, the Loch Ness Monster will always exist. in the minds of people that see it. So back to strange animals other than the Loch Ness Monster. So when I'm doing presentations or talking about cryptids or at a Bigfoot festival or something, one of the biggest topics, probably even on social media too, that I see outside of the Bigfoot topic, it's not always Bigfoot. So in cryptozoology, probably one of the biggest ones that people talk about, especially when you go to these conferences, conventions. I started doing one on large cats, and people just lose their minds because every single person at a paranormal conference either has or knows someone who has seen a black panther roaming the countryside somewhere, whether it's Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Canada. See, I've been in Virginia, so New York. I've heard stories from all over every state I've been in, pretty much, that have talked about large cats. People always see black panthers, and you don't have to look too far to see that there's a pretty big influence on that. We've got this NFL team, Carolina Panthers. They've got a Black Panther as a mascot, as a logo, I guess would be more precise. We don't care about that team. They're going to get crushed by the Browns anyway. Baker Mayfield, come on, get together. But Black Panthers, you see all the high schools, college teams. Black Panthers are part of the culture in the South and even in the East of the United States. So there's some sort of belief, there's some sort of cultural, I'm going to call it a stigma, but a kind of a deep-rooted cultural belief that these creatures are around, even though, again, not to bring up the S word, but science would say otherwise. But I can't travel. I can't talk to more than one or two people before somebody comes up with a story. No. I've seen one. I've seen a Black Panther. Yeah, it's just, you don't have to look too far. You just drive around and you look up Black Panther logos, and again, Carolina, the hockey team, but that's a Florida Panther. That's just a regular Panther, but you got them all over the place down there. It's just kind of amazing that there's such a belief system in Black Panthers. However, despite all these sightings, people showing webcams and photographs and videos, most of those are hoax, fakes. A lot of them are of a known Black Panther from Africa named Cole, who pretty famous from all these pictures, and supposedly everywhere from Michigan to Florida and everywhere else in between. But again, we don't really get to see any good evidence. That is until August 13th. It's all changed. On the morning of August 13th, Dakota Stebbings, a Traverse City photographer, was completing an assignment of taking photographs of the Drew Kostick Memorial 5K Tough Run when he was distracted by a large black cat near the race course. He commented to M Live, quote, "As I was setting up my camera for a large group shot, I noticed a large black animal come into the frame. I instinctively took 5 photos, trying to find the right focus for my group shot. I then watched the animal for another 25 seconds or so before it clicked in my mind what I was even looking at. I watched it prowl low to the ground and sniff around as if it was trying to catch a scent. I then noticed the muscles along this cat's legs and the tail sway slightly. As the cat made its way to the other side of the trees with its ears pinned, I released a long-held breath," unquote. Sounds like he's a writer, not a photographer. Yeah, I'll get to that question. I figured that question would come up about pumas. Let me throw that photograph. Got a photograph of that in there. There's only 2 photographs that we've seen. This is one of them. So it's raining out. I don't know the distance from where he was sitting to where the photo was taken. We don't know So we don't know the distance. We don't know the height. And obviously the tree that we see between us and that cat doesn't really offer us any perspective. So the problem with this picture right away, as soon as you look at it, there's no perspective. You cannot tell how large that cat is. And first glance, when I first saw it on my phone, and you really can't get a whole lot of detail. The thing that jumped out to me, this picture versus the other picture, there's a better view of that tail. And that tail looks long and sweeping, but when I first saw it, I realized that tail is actually not long enough to be a leopard or jaguar or a black panther, which is one of those two cats. And also that head, that's not the head of either one of those cats. So I kind of mentally discounted it as soon as I read the story. Stebbins notified the event's organizers and then finished his assignment. He eventually helped the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in their investigation. And of course, that investigation ruled that the cat was nothing more than a domestic house cat. And again, I mentioned it was raining and the cat's walking through mud. You can see water on the ground. You'd have to be able to lift some obvious prints, but nowhere. I went to Michigan Department of Natural Resources website. I went to their social media outlets. I messaged them on Twitter. I got no response. I want to see pictures of, you had to have taken measurements of these footprints with, an L square so you can see how long and how wide these cat prints are, just to verify. I'm not arguing that this is definitely a black panther, because I don't think it is, but where's the evidence that could put it to bed? That's all I'm worried about. But they concluded domestic house cat, and I hope it's not just from their observation. See, here in Ohio, too, they're really lazy. They just will look at this stuff and just make a basic observation and say, no. They won't come out unless there's a dead animal or threat to life or animals. If they can validate that a large cat has taken down a sheep or a horse or something like that, then they'll come out. Or if you can validate through a track. But I don't see why they could not have lifted prints from them. That's textbook. It's the easiest way to get a track during a rain right there. You could definitely put it to bed. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources is not a stranger to reports of cougar sightings, which is it actually acknowledges, which is one of the few states that do. They acknowledge that there are mountain lion sightings or cougar sightings or puma sightings, catamount sightings. There's hundreds of names for mountain lions. Technically, it's a puma, not the cool shoes and hoodies and stuff, but the animal. They've been observed in nature here on cameras for pretty much, I think, 2008. I know 2008 was a huge time here in Ohio. So since 2008, there's been 80 documented sightings. Now, that's exciting, but the downside to this is that not only do they recognize that these are actual mountain lions sometimes going through, but they're actually only males roaming from the west. So these males eventually either make their way back west or they just live in solitude, and they're not breeding. So they just die off or get hit by cars or shot or just wander around, and maybe they make their way back west. These young cats, they usually get into trouble. But we've not seen as many in the last few years. And part of that is because the Black Hills of South Dakota, which is the closest area to the closest breeding area, closest to the east, they're hunting these cats pretty much into oblivion. They anytime they get out of the area, it's the three S's, the shoot, shovel, and shut up method of taking care of this issue. Because if mountain lions get a stronghold in any state outside of out west like that, in let's say Michigan, there's a breeding pair. Oh boy, then you start conservation. You have to do pass laws. You have to restrict things. People won't be able to go hiking in certain spots, and then of course people are going to freak out because oh my gosh, there's a mountain lion's going to eat my kid, which I guess could happen, but they don't like people. Now, back to the black cat situation. So cougars, mountain lions, pumas, whatever you want to call them. And the problem is that people also call them panthers. So you have the Florida panther. And I think that complicates things because then people hear the word panther and they automatically, your mind goes to Black Panther. But pumas, mountain lions, whatever you want to call them, have never appeared melanistic in the wild. And every time I say that, I hear groans and people throw stuff at me. They say, that's not true. I saw one in 86 here or there or whatever, and so saw one. You didn't. They've never been observed in nature or captivity. They do have the genetics, but the switch for them to actually appear melanistic would be probably 1 billion to 1. It would have to be almost an accident. Like, I shouldn't even say 1 billion to 1. It's probably way higher than that. Probably never happened, despite stories, despite purported photographs of black mountain lions. They just don't exist. People have been trying to mess with DNA to make them breed like that. They still can't even do that. So they don't exist. Now, a lot of people do see mountain lions in the wild, and they look a lot darker due to the way their hair structure is. Even though they have white hairs mixed in with that tawny, sometimes they can appear black if the sun is behind them, and they do that on purpose. They're pretty smart cats, so they kind of disguise themselves and appear darker than what they really are by the way they put themselves between you and the light source. So they can appear as though they're a lot darker. And if you look at skin tones, especially in Florida, they are darker gray, but not black. Versus you go to South America, Central America, all the way up into Alaska. They're the tawny, like the brownish, light brownish color. But they can get a little darker from a reddish, grayish, but never black. So the only melanistic large cats are the leopard and jaguar, when in their black melanistic forms collectively are known as black panthers. It's the same thing with lions and tigers. They never appear melanistic. They just can't, despite photographs, and we've seen fake pictures of black lions. They just don't exist. The jaguar is native to the Americas and extremely rare in melanistic form. The leopard, you'd have, it depends on where you're getting your information from. So the leopard is a little higher. I've seen it as high as 14% of them can appear melanistic versus like 9 to 10% of the jaguar. And the reason why they appear melanistic, they're generally melanistic in dark, heavier tropical regions where there's heavy tree canopy and the floor of the forest, the jungle is more dark. So they, if they were a brighter color, a tawny color, even with their rosettes, their spots, they'd stick out like a sore thumb. So they just don't turn black. It's a process, and not every cat comes out melanistic just because it lives in the darkness. And it's really unfortunate that we see these melanistic cats in zoos and photographs, but they're extremely rare. There are probably more of them in captivity than in the wild. They're pretty rare to be seen in the wild. I think the first one ever seen in Africa was 2019. I've been 20 some odd years, I think, between spotting an actual black panther. So they're very, very rare. So while a jaguar is native to the Americas, they don't really live in the United States. There's a breeding area in Mexico. I think it's about 100 some odd miles from the border. and they got to have a passport to get in the United States, and they have to climb the wall too. So that's why you don't see them. No, that's not true. There has been, I think, 2 documented jaguars. The last one is nicknamed El Jefe, pretty big jaguar, but it's not the black panther type. It's the normal tawny and black coat with the rosettes, the little kind of circles with the dark spots on it. So that's really what you normally would see with a leopard and jaguar. And a jaguar is a little more stocky, a little bit more robust, bulky, versus a leopard. A leopard is more skinny, would represent more of what's in this photograph, what this gentleman took. A skinnier, long, thinner, more like a, I guess you'd say like a cheetah kind of body structure, although they're a little bit skinnier. But yeah, it's neither one of these. If you look at the profile of a jaguar and a leopard, it's definitely not that black cat that he took a photograph of. But nonetheless, there is a little concern. I haven't heard much lately since the story broke. Nobody's spotted this thing. It's probably just a big house cat. A lot of feral cats all over the U.S., and you're not used to seeing them. And again, there's no perspective in this photograph. So, of course, this guy probably doesn't get out much, doesn't see, animals. I don't know. I shouldn't be judging. But maybe he just misinterpreted what he saw. But still like to see the tracks to that. And speaking of wild animals on the loose, large cats on the loose, Hawaii has been dealing with a large cat sighting. It's, one of your traditional tawny-colored cats. They're not sure what it is, but a guy was out weed whacking one day, and he thought it was a large dog. And it's on the Big Island. So it's on Hawaii, on the Kona coast. There on the west coast of the Big Island. A few people have seen this. This guy was out trimming his weeds, and he saw this large creature. He grabbed his rifle, and he fired a round. And he said that the creature jumped 6 feet in the air, which kind of flipped him out a little bit. The animal scampered off, apparently, but they're not happy about this. Hawaii's Department of Land and Natural Resources, they're setting up cameras in the area. This has been going on since August 16th, and I've not heard anything since then, which is not good. The longer the time goes by, this cat's not going to stick around, probably, unless it's more or less, it's probably a released cat. It might have escaped. Although Hawaii, they're pretty strict on that stuff. They're prohibited in Hawaii. You're not going to get, it's supposedly prohibited everywhere in the United States, but to transport that would be pretty difficult into Hawaii, I would think. But you release a cat like that on the mainland or any of these islands, it's just going to cause all sorts of problems. Unfortunately, Hawaii has a long-standing tradition of releasing animals on their islands that shouldn't be there, from deer to wolverines to mice to rats to, wallabies are out there on one of the islands. All sorts of animals just accidentally or purposely released for one reason or another that are just wreaking havoc on the ecosystems. But having a large cat running around, obviously somebody either let it loose or it got loose. That's not good. Puts people at risk. An animal like that probably won't survive very long if it's trimmed its nails or anything like that, or it's not used to hunting, and it could make its way closer to people if it's been around people. But again, no update on this. Maybe it was just a dog. Maybe it was just a large house cat. Hawaii, in addition to all the other animals I mentioned, they have a ginormous feral cat problem. They used to have a feral dog problem, but I guess Hawaiians used to eat dogs, so they kind of took care of that on their own. But the feral cat problem is out of control, and that could be what we're seeing. These cats have no natural predators, so they are going to grow a little bit bigger. Granted, they're on it's a decent sized island, but a lot of stuff to eat. So I'm sure they're going to grow pretty big. So hopefully that's all they're seeing. Again, no tracks to speak of. So we shall see. But it's been so long that we've not seen it. So the longer you go, the less likely you are to spot something like that. Something that was released, potentially, I don't want to call it domesticated, but captured, locked up. And we'll finish the news tonight talking about probably one of the saddest subjects the last 3 weeks. Very upset. I kind of knew it was going to happen. I got up on Monday morning already knowing this was going to happen. The Artemis I launch supposed to take place Monday morning at 8:33 a.m. Eastern Time was scrubbed. And I kind of had a feeling they had I was up late the night before, and they were talking about delaying filling up the tanks. And I was like, well, that's not a good idea. That you're just going to run into problems. But I got up in the morning anyway, and sure enough, they ran into problems. They had some weather issues, but the big thing had been the number 3 engine. They weren't able to properly cool it prior to ignition, which I listened to the what do you call it? The press audio from. They had a meeting. It was supposed to be at 6, but it was like 6:20. I had to wait. One of the engineers likened it to a dragster or a race car. So when you get into a race car, you just don't start the engine and start driving around the track or fly down the drag strip. You have to get your engine warmed up and at the correct temperature for it to operate at peak condition. And with, obviously, it's not an internal combustion engine, but it's a rocket, which is basically a controlled explosion, which propels this rocket to 12,000 miles an hour plus to get it away from Earth's gravity. And no, it doesn't go straight up. I never understood. I see people like, well, why is that rocket going crooked? It should go straight up to get out of it. No, it's not how it works. Yes, gravity, but no, the Earth is spinning. It's the best way for it to get away from the Earth's gravity. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that detail, but yeah, they had some issues, and I guess it's probably better off than having the third engine explode and blowing that whole thing to kingdom come, because that would not have looked good. But even if they knew something was wrong, I already felt like they're gonna roll that thing out there to the launch pad anyway, because it's been so much money, so much time, and people are just, there's no incentive right now, because it's not like we're in a space race. We're not first people to get to the moon. We've already been there, but it's just for science sake, pretty much at this point. And politicians and people who write paychecks don't care about 5-10 years down the road, or if the launch is delayed for 3 weeks. They want results now. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a few more days. The next launch window, they've opted for Saturday. Initially, they said Friday. But if the rocket needs substantial work, they'll move the stack back to the vehicle assembly building, which will take 3.5 days traveling at 1 mile per hour. And I would not be surprised if we heard between now and Friday that they're going to scrub for Saturday and haul this thing back and redo some of the plumbing for that engine 3. But I think they've kind of figured it out. It's just a faulty sensor. So they're going to just kind of like, I don't know, lick the tank, I guess, make sure it's cold enough. I'm not sure how that would work. But it sounds as if they're pretty fairly sure that there should be they said more than 0% chance, pretty much is what they're saying for Saturday. So that's pretty positive. But a lot of it depends on the weather as well. So a lot of people have asked, well, why bother going back to the moon? We were there 50 years ago, well, almost 50 years ago, December 19th, 1972. Well, we got a lot more to learn. All the stuff we brought back, we've pretty much tapped it for any knowledge that we can. So if we can go up and collect more samples, we can probably learn a little bit more. We're also looking to go to a different place than we've been. So potentially some trapped water, some ice on the moon in that area, we'll be able to maybe detect that, which would be fantastic. So we could ruin the moon. The Yeah, so there's a lot more to learn. So the Artemis I mission that we're talking about here, it's an unmanned mission. There's basically a commander, a dummy that's inside of the new spacesuit that they're going to be using to test it out. And there's two torso dummies that I asked to take the place of one of them to go up there, but they won't let me. And then there's a Mickey Mouse thing up there, I think. But yeah, that's just a test just to make sure everything is going to go okay. They're going to launch the unmanned crew, the space capsule around the moon and back. But there's a lot of things that are going to happen with that. So when the space vehicle is approaching, the Orion spacecraft is approaching the moon, there's actually some satellites, CubeSats are going to spit out of the front of this thing, and they're going to circle the moon. So the moon's going to have some satellites, which I think China's already got some up there. Russia might have one or two up there. I think we already got some. But these are specifically to aid in the future manned missions. That's going to make our life a little bit easier than what it was in the 60s and 70s. The moon mission, of course, is also our first step at establishing ourselves in space beyond the International Space Station, which is on its last legs. It's not going to be around too much longer. And once that's gone, what do we do? Where are we going to go? How are we going to research space? It's also a first step in going to Mars and eventually beyond. So establishing ourselves on the moon, maybe it could be a spaceport or a launching point or a landing point where we would take from there and go to Mars. So we wouldn't just launch off of Earth and go to Mars. We may launch, go to the moon, and then go to Mars, which would cut the distance down, be able to open up more windows to travel there. And of course, we could dig up all the stuff there on the moon and use those natural resources to maybe fuel up. If we do find water, we can fuel up different things to travel even further out into space. Of course, with that too, when we do launch out into space, there's going to be some new technology that's going to be created, not only to aid space travel and survival, but also here on Earth. We haven't updated, I mentioned the spacesuits. We haven't updated spacesuits in like 30 years. We came out with that cool pen that can write upside down in zero gravity, and the freeze-dried ice cream and all that fun stuff came from space travel. So who knows what else we're going to come up with. Maybe some car technology, some other traveling things. Who knows what could come from this technology. And of course, going to the moon is also hopefully going to inspire a new generation of scientists, which is what I'm hopeful for. We need to pass the torch. We need to get people excited about science, about space, because it's, it seems like everyone's worried about their YouTube hits and their social media followers and, how they're influencing other people. But it's a bigger place. And we need to start thinking about, not in the next 20, 30, 40 years, but decades, generations down the road. If we keep messing up planet Earth, and where are we going to go? But even then, eventually, even if we do take care of the Earth, the sun's going to envelop us, billion or so years down the road. We're not going to be here forever. And it's just kind of in our DNA to travel, to conquer things, to go to new places. Sounds like Star Trek. So again, they're going to launch hopefully on Saturday, September 3rd. The launch window opens at 2:17 p.m. Eastern. It will last for 2 hours. We'll just hopefully the weather, and if there's any technological issues, I'm sure that it'll scrub the launch long before that. So that's all I got for this week. We will have a show next week, but for now, keep your eyes in the skies, your ears in the woods, the hair standing on the back of your neck, and always keep your mind slightly ajar. Above all else, don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting.